Hello and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video we're going to be discussing Vegeta as a god of destruction. We've gotten a lot of hints at a connection between the gods of destruction and Vegeta throughout Dragon Ball Super. But what if I was to tell you that not only would Vegeta become a god of destruction, but that it is also his destiny to become a god of destruction? So I'm going to break down exactly why this is the case, why the entire concept of a god of destruction is centered around Vegeta as a character, and why Vegeta is actually suitable for the role of god of destruction. So let's go all the way back to Vegeta's introduction. Now, one thing I want you to notice is that when Vegeta is first introduced as a character, his destructive potential is really discussed and exaggerated and talked about a lot within the dialogue and shown a lot within the plot, and that's not done on accident. They've always wanted to make Vegeta seem like a destructive force of nature, not only because he's a Saiyan, but because of his beliefs. Now, we all know that Vegeta meeting Goku was one of the most important events in his life, but it was actually the most important event when it comes to his destiny as a god of destruction. And the reason why is because Goku was Vegeta's introduction to mortal development. Goku, thanks to being sent to Earth, was raised by Grandpa Gohan, and through his efforts as a martial artist, he has become one of the strongest beings in the entire multiverse, going as far as to achieve the enlightened state of the gods itself, Ultra Instinct, which Ultra Instinct itself is a direct reference to the idea that Goku was raised as an Earthling. So when you consider that Ultra Instinct is basically considered the peak of mortal development, and that it's themed around Goku as an Earthling, and Vegeta being so disgusted at the fact that he was born elite, and that Goku, a low-class warrior, was born and developed to the point that he could keep up with Vegeta, this elite-class warrior, this is essentially Vegeta's introduction to the idea of mortal development. Goku is Vegeta's introduction to the idea of mortal development. So not only was Goku important for Vegeta's future as a god of destruction, it's probably the most important thing to happen to him in terms of his future as a god of destruction. Now in this saga, and this is something that's constantly overlooked, Vegeta's standard for mortals is actually established to us via his relationship with Nappa. Now, a lot of people don't think about this, but Nappa was essentially Vegeta's father figure for years and years and years. Vegeta was added to Nappa's team as a combatant to learn under Nappa how to be a proper Saiyan combatant. That means that their entire life they've had this relationship where Nappa has sort of been giving Vegeta the ropes. He's sort of been introducing him to what the Saiyans do when they conquer planets. And so that really explains Nappa's expression whenever he thinks that Vegeta is going to be there for him and help him, because Nappa actually looks at Vegeta as something like a son. Despite that, Vegeta decides to wipe out Nappa because he is useless as a Saiyan warrior if he can't move. Now in Dragon Ball Super Broly, a lot of people don't catch on to this, but Vegeta did not care at all, and they make it very clear in that film. He did not care at all that the planet was destroyed, and he also makes that very clear in the Namek Saga. But why? Well, it's because of the idea of Saiyan pride that Vegeta was taught as a child. He believed that Saiyans should have such pride in themselves that they refused to lower themselves to such a level, very similar to a samurai, to where if you have dishonored yourself, you might as well just commit harakiri. And that's essentially Vegeta's attitude. He thinks that if you don't fit the standard of the Saiyan warriors, you're useless. And this is very important because this is the groundwork, this is the foundation for Vegeta's standard as a god of destruction as it's developed in the future. Ultra Ego and the idea of a god of destruction is a direct reference to the ideas of the Saiyans themselves. Back on Namek, whenever Vegeta told Goku to harden his heart in order to take down Frieza, that's essentially what he's trying to accomplish through Ultra Ego. So Ultra Ego is a representation of Vegeta's ideas themselves. It's essentially what his idea of Super Saiyan always was, except he's manifested it into his own transformation. He always thought that the Super Saiyan was a bloodthirsty warrior who loved battle over all things and was just completely a destructive force of nature, and that is what Ultra Ego represents. It represents what he thinks the Saiyans should be. Now, another huge hint at Vegeta's future as a god of destruction is his fight with Imperfect Cell. Now, I've talked about how Perfect Cell is a reference to the idea of perfection within the Buddhist context, the idea that you reincarnate and reincarnate until you become perfect. And Vegeta is a reflection of his future as a god of destruction here, because he is willing to let Cell become perfect in order to defeat him and inflate his ego. Now, I'm going to come back to this later, but this is very, very, very god of destruction-like. And it's a really cool way to parallel Goku's ability to accidentally develop mortals around him, because this is Vegeta's way of doing that with conscious intent, but not doing it with the intentions of actually developing said mortals, but doing it with the intentions of feeding his ego. And I think that this is going to be a motivator for Vegeta in the future as a god of destruction. Not the only motivator, but I do think that this is going to be part of his motivation when he actually does take on the role of a god of destruction. Now, in the Buu Saga, Vegeta is actually openly rejecting the mortal development that he's going through on Earth because he feels that his place in the universe is, again, to be a destructive force of nature, which is why he essentially sold his soul to Babidi, because he believes that that is actually what he's supposed to be. That is the core of his beliefs, that the Saiyans are supposed to be destructive. They're supposed to be a destructive, ruling force of nature in the universe. And one thing I really like about Toriyama playing on this idea in this arc was not only the whole idea of before creation comes destruction, where Vegeta destroys himself as Majin Vegeta and then is reborn later on in the Buu Saga, but it's also really interesting that Vegeta is taking on the version of Buu that most resembles Buddha himself, and he destroys himself in order to destroy this version of Buu. You gotta understand like how genius this is on Toriyama's part, because the symbolism here is just absolute insanity. Because Vegeta destroys himself in order to destroy this Buu figure that resembles Buddha, which is essentially symbolic of him trying to destroy his Buddha nature. Goku ends up later on facing Kid Buu, who resembles Sun Wukong and the monkey mind, and ends up destroying him, like Buddha, through essentially crushing him with the spirit bomb with his palm, and then encouraging the monkey mind to reincarnate as a Buddha. So Akira Toriyama is actually playing on Vegeta and Goku's character themes as characters that have their themes derived from Journey to the West and from martial arts and from Buddhist practices through these two interactions between Vegeta and Majin Buu and Goku and Kid Buu. And so the way that Akira Toriyama plays with the symbolism here is very, very, very interesting, and it's representative of the idea that Vegeta's true inner nature is a destructive force of nature, very, very, very opposite to Goku, and he's starting to develop the nature of an Earthling, and that is the parallel between Goku and Vegeta. Goku was a character who gained the nature he needed, that the plot itself rewards and holds in high regard as the standard of mortals throughout the multiverse, as a child. And so he sort of started at the peak of mortal development in terms of his mentality and in terms of his nature. And that's what makes Goku such a cool character, because Goku is sort of a character who has to learn the merit of evil. He has to learn the merit of Vegeta's ways. He has to learn to maintain balance through observing Vegeta and learning more about the Saiyans to balance himself out to where he's not too merciful, his earthling nature is not too powerful. It's sort of a backwards development to most heroes, to where Vegeta is rubbing off on Goku, and the necessary evil that Goku needs to implement in order to destroy his enemies is the effect that Vegeta has on Goku's personality, and vice versa. Vegeta is starting to develop in the same way that Goku did under Grandpa Gohan. Now, at the end of the Buu Saga, there is another huge hint at Vegeta's role as a destroyer, and that is the fact that he still wants to wipe out Majin Buu, and Goku does not. Now, this is something very, very important that I want to establish, because this is something that a lot of people overlook about Vegeta's development, because they think he reached the peak of his character development in Dragon Ball Z, and that is simply not the case. Because when Vegeta gives his speech to Goku about how he's number one, and he essentially established to us why Goku is rewarded so much in the plot, he himself says that he refuses to do this. He still fights to feed his ego. He still fights to destroy his opponents and to enjoy destroying his opponents. And so he is still the exact opposite of Goku. And we actually see this firsthand at the end of the arc whenever Vegeta is unwilling to spare Majin Buu, which means that Vegeta still has plenty of development and has a long way to go before he reaches the mindset that the plot itself rewards in terms of what it means to be a mortal that the gods themselves look upon as the shining example of mortal development. But why is it that Vegeta's dedication to the idea of destruction is bad and Beerus' ideas are considered good and necessary within the universe? Well, it's because Beerus only thinks about destruction, whereas Vegeta is doing all of these things with the conscious intent of enjoying himself, getting revenge, and puffing up his pride. And so due to that, because of that, he's doing the exact opposite of what the plot rewards, and that's the reason that Vegeta is constantly punished. It's very similar to what's happened in the past in Dragon Ball, like Bulma constantly doing things that she shouldn't do and being punished for it, Krillin constantly doing things that he shouldn't do and being punished for it. This is something that predates Dragon Ball Z. Now, when we get to Dragon Ball Super, Beerus is our introduction into what it means to be a god of destruction. And if you'll notice that Beerus destroys a planet after someone attempts to poison him, and he's just sitting there enjoying food, doing whatever he wants, ruling over the universe. He has no issues. Like, he's literally the top of the universe. There is nobody above Beerus. He does whatever he wants. He's essentially a king in a sense. And that's something that a lot of people overlook about the job of God of Destruction, and Beerus actually talks about this a bit in the Future Trunks saga. It's not a hard job. You can do whatever you want as long as you just wipe out unnecessary planets every once in a while, which is why it's a job that is literally designed to cater to who Vegeta is as a character. Vegeta's not about to get a job as a radish farmer like Goku, so the only job they could give him is the job of a God of Destruction. It makes perfect sense. And they start setting this up immediately in Super. One of the things that is overlooked about Beerus and Vegeta's relationship at the start of Super is that Beerus is the reason that Vegeta lost all pride in his father, because Beerus was a better example of the type of pride that Vegeta was taught by his father than his father was. He watched Beerus dominate his father, and this scared the crap out of him, but it didn't just scare the crap out of him. He is looking at an example of the type of person that he wants to be. His father, his own father, did not measure up to the expectations that he had for the Saiyan race, which is why he talks about on Namek, he doesn't care that the Saiyans were wiped out, because they didn't meet his standard. Nappa being destroyed at the very beginning of the story surrounding Vegeta is to establish to us Vegeta's standard in terms of Saiyan pride, and the fact that he didn't care about the Saiyans being destroyed because they did not meet his standard. And his standard is very, very important because it's very similar to the standard that Beerus has as a God of Destruction. If you watch Beerus' interaction with Goku, he wants to destroy Goku until Goku stands up to him, just like Bardock stood up to Frieza. This is very, very, very important. I've talked about this multiple times because the music for the scene where Bardock gets destroyed in Dragon Ball Super Broly and the scene in Battle of Gods, they have the same music, they have the same setup. There's a reason for that. And that is because Beerus respects the same type of attitude here that Goku is showing by being so resilient and standing up for his planet. He respects that, and that's very, very, very similar to how Vegeta feels when it comes to his standard for mortals. He wants them to have this sort of pride in themselves and stand up for themselves and stand up against destruction and have so much strength and pride in their ideas and their way of doing things that they're willing to face death itself. They are willing to face destruction itself. And it's very interesting because this is very polar opposite to Frieza. He does not like people having this attitude. That's the reason he wanted to wipe out Bardock and the Saiyans. If Beerus met Bardock, he would have so much respect for him because he has the exact type attitude that Beerus himself respects here in Goku. And that's very, very important because it's a reflection of the fact that Beerus himself is a reflection of Vegeta as a character. Whis and Beerus only exist as characters because Vegeta and Goku exist as characters. They are reflections of these two characters. And that is because Vegeta and Goku are a reflection of two characters from Journey to the West that represent yin and yang. Beerus, Whis, Goku, Vegeta, Sun Wukong, and Tripitaka all have this in common. They all represent the idea of yin and yang, the Buddha nature, and the monkey mind within their stories, and that's a really cool thing to keep in mind here. Now, the next major hint we get at Vegeta as a God of Destruction is Dragon Ball Super Chapter 12, Saiyan Pride. Now, this chapter actually directly parallels the chapter where Vegeta wipes out Nappa, and there's a reason for that, and that is because Kaba actually fits the standard of Vegeta's standard in terms of what he wants out of the Saiyans. And it's funny because he meets that standard because he has a true sense of Saiyan pride that Nappa and even Vegeta himself did not have back during the Saiyan saga. Remember, Vegeta ran away. Kaba is willing to do anything to protect Planet Sadala. He's showing the same type of pride that Goku showed against Beerus, that Bardock showed against Frieza. He is a true example of what Vegeta is looking for in the Saiyans. And this is very important because this is to establish to us Vegeta's standard for all of mortals as a God of Destruction in the future. You'll notice that Vegeta is treating Kaba almost exactly like Beerus treated Goku in Battle of Gods. Their relationship is almost nearly identical, and there is a reason for that. And that is because Vegeta is being treated as a God of Destruction in training here. The build-up to this is so ridiculously clear that I've known for a very long time that they were doing this. I've known for a very long time that this is a build-up to Vegeta being an example of the necessity of destruction, because that has been his role since all the way back in Dragon Ball Z when he encouraged Goku to harden his heart so he could take out Frieza. And it's really poetic and cool because Vegeta wasn't there to try and stop Frieza. He wasn't there. He couldn't do it. And in the end, he didn't really care because, again, they didn't fit his standard. But it really makes you wonder, what would have Vegeta done had he been there? Would he have stood up for the planet? Would he have been an example of the pride that he is trying to get others to embrace? Bardock was the perfect example of this pride, and they play on this later in the Granolah Saga, which I'll talk about soon. But it's very clear here that this is just a stage in the development of Vegeta as a future God of Destruction. And almost everything that Vegeta goes through in Dragon Ball Super is treated as the next stage of not only his development as a mortal, but his development as a god of destruction. For example, after the Black Arc, whenever Vegeta and Beerus have their rematch, you can visibly see Beerus use destruction against Vegeta to defeat him and tell him that it'll take millions of years for him to catch up to him because he is simply using a power-up, Super Saiyan Blue, from Super Saiyan God. Now, this is prior to Ultra Ego, and this is prior to the knowledge that we have in terms of how it works now, but now that we do know how Ultra Ego works, this makes perfect sense because Beerus has no limit to his power because he thinks about nothing but destruction. And so Vegeta is going to have to fulfill the role of a god of destruction before he can even keep up with Beerus. And before you say, oh, that's never going to happen, the Oracle Fish specifically said that Goku and Vegeta are going to be Beerus' greatest rivals, and now that they both have Ultra Instinct and Ultra Ego, that is coming to fruition in a way it never has before, previously in Dragon Ball Super. Now, before I move on in the Dragon Ball Super manga, there's a couple of honorable mentions and important things that happen in the Dragon Ball Super anime that we need to discuss. So the first thing that we need to discuss is the fact that Vegeta almost destroyed Frieza in ROF. The reason he did not get to destroy Frieza is because, again, he's doing it for personal reasons. He's not doing it as a god of destruction. He is doing it as a mortal with a grudge. That is the reason he lost on Namek, and that is the reason that he lost on Earth. And that is the reason that Goku got to take out Frieza both times, because Goku is capable of having pure intentions naturally due to the fact that he is the pinnacle of mortal development. And in the Tournament of Power, a lot of people assume, based on Vegeta's fight with Toppo, that he would never become a god of destruction because he was so disgusted with Toppo's antics as a god of destruction. This is incorrect, and I'll explain why. Toppo had to give up his ideas of justice in order to be a god of destruction. Vegeta, his ideas are centered around destruction. So Vegeta is actually embracing his ideas by being a god of destruction, whereas Toppo is abandoning his ideas, which is why it was so disgusting to Vegeta that he would abandon his own ideas and his own beliefs, because that goes in hand with Vegeta's standard as a god of destruction. It's really ironic because Vegeta is not only expressing his standard for mortals through his fight with Toppo, through his disgust with Toppo, but Toppo is expressing the same type of attitude as a god of destruction that Vegeta looks down on and is disgusted by, which is really funny. It's really interesting. The psychological elements of that fight are very, very interesting. They're underrated because Toppo, you would think that Vegeta would respect, Toppo giving up his ideas of justice and doing something that complements his own ideas, but no, that's not how it works. Vegeta wants others to have pride in themselves. He wants them to have pride in their ideas, and he wants to encourage them to push themselves, be as headstrong and stubborn as humanly possible. And one really cool thing about the Moro arc, Vegeta makes it clear here that he is a villain towards villains. Now, what does that mean? Well, you got to keep in mind that Dragon Ball is a show based out of Japan, which is 70% Buddhist, and so their idea of killing and sinning and what's wrong and what's right is very, very different, right? And so Vegeta even killing Moro with conscious intent is considered bad within the Buddhist context and within the context of martial arts. It's a bad thing. And so Vegeta is actually sinning here, and he knows that. And that's the reason that he's telling Moro, I know I'm going to help. I'm a villain towards villains. I destroy because I want to, because I think that's the right thing to do. I don't care whether the universe, whether everyone else considers this the right thing to do. I consider it the right thing to do. And I'm going to do whatever I feel is right because I am that strong in my ideas and my beliefs. Again, it reflects Vegeta's standard as a god of destruction. But the most important arc in terms of Vegeta's development as a god of destruction, the most blatant that we've seen so far, is of course the Granolah arc. Now, why is that? Well, Vegeta's development under Beerus, learning to let go of his sins and embrace nothing but destruction, is of course something that led him to embrace the mindset of a destroyer and actually take on a transformation that literally makes him a god of destruction. He is literally a god of destruction in Ultra Ego. Goku can feel that Vegeta's chi is that of a god of destruction. But that's not all of the development that happens here. There's a lot of hidden development in the Granolah arc for Vegeta in terms of heading towards the direction of becoming a god of destruction. As a matter of fact, Vegeta is sort of going through a hyperloop of development and becoming more and more and more like Beerus, and we have to assume that it took millions and millions of years for Beerus to become the type of person that he is. And so Vegeta is going through, again, like a hyperloop of development where he's being influenced by Beerus, whether he realizes it or not. Now, one thing I really like about the Granolah arc is it introduced this competition between the God of Destruction technique and Ultra Instinct. It's very, very similar to the rivalry that Goku and Vegeta themselves have. I really like how they took their rivalry and made it into a rivalry between the God of Destruction technique and Ultra Instinct itself. I think that's really cool, and it just goes to show you the future dynamic of Goku and Vegeta underneath Beerus and Whis. Again, it's very, very clear that they are heading in the direction of Vegeta being a practicing god of destruction, and Goku, accidentally developing mortals as he always has. Goku's role is not really going to change that much because he's always been special to the plot, but his role is going to change in the sense that he's going to be a more established part of the cycle of creation and destruction. So Vegeta's antics here with Granolah are extremely similar to his antics with Kaba. They're also very similar to Beerus' antics with Goku, and there's a reason for that. And that is because Granolah is a reflection of the issues that Vegeta himself has to deal with to progress as a god of destruction. The past enslaving him, and his extreme resolve in his need for revenge, his superiority complex, all of this, Granolah is a character who is crafted to reflect Vegeta as a character and the issues that are holding him back from being a god of destruction, which is very, very interesting because he's also a reflection of Goku had he never lost his memories and was dedicated to getting revenge on Frieza. It's a very, very interesting dynamic, and it's one of the reasons that I love Granolah as a character, because the way he is crafted is just so well done. He's such a cool reflection of Goku and Vegeta in that sense. So when Vegeta first taps into Ultra Ego, he does so through his heart pumping in battle. This is a direct reference to not only Goku facing Piccolo and having to harden his heart in order to take down King Piccolo through embracing this effect that his heart beating has on his nature, it's also, again, a reflection of what happened on Namek whenever Vegeta told Goku he needed to harden his heart to take down Frieza, and it's also a reflection of what Gas tells Goku he needs to do in order to defeat him in this arc. All of these things are connected because it's all building up to Vegeta having the ability to have pure intentions when he's destroying someone, so that way he can get away with it and not suffer for it the way the Saiyans have through their sins. You can sort of think of it as Vegeta becoming above the laws of life and death, above the laws of morality, very similar to becoming a Buddha. That's essentially what is happening to Vegeta here, and that is very, very interesting. Now, the greatest evidence and the coolest evidence that I have that Vegeta will, in fact, not only become a god of destruction, but also be the one to take down Frieza, is that Dragon Ball has this habit of punishing characters and causing them to suffer until they eventually have their nature purified, and at that point they get exactly what they want. And this is a reoccurring theme in the series. Remember, this happened to Bulma. Bulma got a boyfriend in the original manga because of the change that she went through on her journey with Goku. Krillin, he landed Android 18 because of the change that he went through on his journey that caused him to be selfless to make the wish to get Android 18. 17, he got his boat for wishing the multiverse back. But what is it that Vegeta has always wished for? What is it that he has always wanted? Well, let's go back to Namek and look. He's always wanted to destroy Frieza. He's always wanted to rule the universe. And he's always wanted to be immortal. Now, he doesn't want to be immortal anymore. And that's good, because that's a reflection of his character development. Now, in the Granolah arc, it's established that he himself still has an issue with revenge, because he encourages Granolah to try and get revenge, and that almost costs Granolah his life. Again, the series is telling you over and over and over and over again what it punishes and what it rewards through what's happening here in the Granolah Saga. The sins represent the ideas that Vegeta himself have encouraged throughout the entire series. That's what the sins of the Saiyans are. They're just Vegeta's ideas that he's had so much pride in his entire existence throughout the Dragon Ball anime and Dragon Ball manga. And so Vegeta is just a living example of his own pride, his own ideas, when he is willing to die for the sins of the Saiyans. And one of the coolest things about this scene that people overlook is that it is a direct reference and reflection of the day that Bardock was killed. Vegeta is a representation of planet Vegeta and the ideas they had that caused them to be destroyed. And Goku is a representation of Bardock trying to save planet Vegeta. That's what this scene is. It's just a really cool little nod and reference to the past of the Saiyans themselves. Now, why was Bardock's effect on Vegeta so important in terms of his development as not only a Saiyan and immortal, but a god of destruction? Well, let's look at the things that Bardock establishes to us in terms of what his idea of Saiyan pride is. Number 1, a Saiyan would rather die than run from an enemy. Number 2, they're not leaving a battle until they've won. Number 3, Bardock had pride in not just himself, but also the entire Saiyan race and his son. That's what his wish signifies, is that unlike other Saiyans, he has pride in his entire species. And number 4, in a battle of life and death, he only perceives nothing but his own survival. So essentially, he embraces his instincts in battle, and therefore, he is capable of killing without conscious intention because he's only thinking about his own survival, which is amoral by nature. It's not a good mindset. It's not an evil mindset. It's a neutral mindset that represents the happy medium between Goku and Vegeta's ideas. Now, what you are seeing happen here in the Granolah arc is you are seeing Vegeta start to not just extend his pride to the Saiyan race like he did Kaba. He, thanks to Bardock's influence and Bardock's pride in his son and in his species, is starting to want to extend that pride to all species, Granolah included, everyone. And so the reason it's so important that Vegeta's standard for mortals develops as the series itself develops is because that is going to determine what Vegeta's standard is for mortals when he becomes a god of destruction. Now, Vegeta, again, he does encourage Granolah to get revenge, right? And he himself still has this obsession with revenge. But Vegeta himself shows that he is starting to understand the issue with his own ways through his fight with Granolah. Now, what do I mean by that? Granolah is literally Vegeta from the Saiyan Saga, but he's a good guy. That's it. That's what he is. Like, his devotion towards getting revenge, his pride in his species, his standard for what he himself should be is a direct reflection of what Vegeta thought he should be during the Saiyan Saga, and Vegeta is facing an incarnation of who he was in the past. Despite the fact that he's not completely evil, he still represents all of these ideas that Vegeta needs to get through in order to become a god of destruction. He even tells Granolah, he says, your tribe was not always this savage. He gives him crap for surviving all this time just to try and take revenge. So Vegeta actually shows that he is starting to understand the issues with his own ways. But despite that, he is devoted to his own ideas so much that he can't help himself. Right after he tells Granolah that there should be more to his life than revenge, he immediately tells him that he can't deny his grand mission and that he should just come at him with everything he's got. And the reason he's telling him that is because he's encouraging him to do the same things that he himself has done in the past. Okay? Now, the differentiating factor here is that Granolah is not a bad person. By heart, by nature, he is not a bad person. Okay? He is just falling victim to his need for revenge. Vegeta was completely evil at heart. He enjoyed doing the things that Granolah is a victim of. He enjoyed it. And so he feels as though he is an example of the sins that cost Granolah his past, his family. And so Vegeta feels that it is likely his fate to be destroyed because of his ideas. And that is true, but in reality, he's not the only one. Granolah is also a living example, despite the fact that he is not evil, of what the plot itself punishes. And that is the reason that Granolah has to be willing to sacrifice his own life to take down Vegeta, because Granolah himself is not in the right here either. Okay? The entire plot is essentially communicating to you through Granolah, through Vegeta, through Goku, through Gas, all of these characters, what the plot rewards and what it punishes. That's the reason the Dragon Balls were such a huge factor in this arc, and that is the reason that, all of this stuff is being discussed the way it is, because it's trying to communicate to you what exactly the series itself rewards, and that is the same type of attitude that Goku himself has practiced since the original Dragon Ball. Granolah practices at the end of the arc. Vegeta is starting to learn to practice as his story progresses, and the type of attitude that Bardock showed us whenever we got to see the flashback in the Granolah arc. Now remember, at the very end of the arc, what cost Gas his life? And what caused Granolah to come out with the best possible scenario at the end of the story? Well, it was Gas's need for revenge to take down Frieza that ultimately cost him his life. And it was Granolah giving up his need for revenge that ultimately caused him to have the best possible scenario for himself. So the plot is telling you that if Vegeta can achieve this, if he can achieve what Bardock, Goku, Granolah, all of these characters are an example of, he can finally be rewarded by fate. And Vegeta's specific way of doing this is catered towards the benefit of destruction itself. Some beings aren't going to be changed through being destroyed and being reincarnated. They need to be permanently erased. And so, by the end of all this, Vegeta will likely get what he's always wanted, all the way back on Namek. He's going to get it because he's going to develop the nature that he needs in order for the plot to reward him completely. Vegeta still has not reached that pinnacle point that Goku reached in the original Dragon Ball, to where he has the nature to manipulate fate into his favor. He has not developed that yet in the plot, coming closer than he ever has through Ultra Ego. Beerus is a living example of the type of being that he needs to become in order to be the benefactor of fate. So he's becoming closer to that than he's ever become before. But he's going to have to do it soon, because Frieza has attained this mindset. Frieza has attained the mindset that he needs in order to be rewarded by the plot. He's essentially attained the mindset that Goku had on Namek when he became a Super Saiyan, and he attained his perfect balance, and that is the mindset that the plot itself will always reward, and that is the reason that they always talk about the shifting of the balance in reference to Frieza within the Granolah arc, because by attaining this mindset, he can manipulate reality into his favor. Pay very close attention to what happens when Frieza shows up at the end of the Granolah arc. He actually takes out Gas and Elec because they don't fit the standard that Kami set in the original Dragon Ball for what the plot itself looks for in mortals. Frieza himself had mercy on Goku and Vegeta and wiped out two beings who are the opposite of what the universe looks for in terms of mortals, just like a god of destruction. So Frieza has attained this mindset that Vegeta is struggling to attain. And the best example of Vegeta's role as a god of destruction is whenever he tells Goku that his ultra ego has evolved, but what of Goku's ultra instinct? He is essentially extending his pride to Goku at that moment because he is, again, a representation of the balance that Goku has always needed to strike between his nature as an Earthling and Vegeta's nature as a Saiyan. Vegeta has always been a representation of Goku needing to find that balance within himself. And so Vegeta's role as a god of destruction and the scene where Goku attains true ultra instinct is being used to communicate to you the message of Goku and Vegeta's role as beings who develop mortals. Vegeta is supposed to extend his pride to other species, but not the pride that he used to have back in the original Dragon Ball Z, but the true sense of Saiyan pride that he just learned as a result of his exposure to Bardock. And that is why at the end of the arc, Granolah practices this type of pride, but he doesn't do it in the name of revenge. And Goku's role is to instill the same nature that he gained on Earth to everyone around him. And so with the two of those combined, you are creating a perfect balance, and you are creating essentially the ideal mortal within the context of mortal development. Vegeta is instilling the same type of pride that the plot itself rewards into the mortals around him, not his old pride, and Goku is helping people develop the nature that he developed on Earth. And that is ultimately their role in the cycle of creation and destruction, is to have this effect on the mortals around them, and Granolah was treated as a perfect example of this concept. Now, I wanted to save this for the end of the video because I wanted to try and keep this video as Dragon Ball centric as possible and talk about Journey to the West as little as I could, because I talk about it a lot in my videos. I'm consciously aware of this, guys. But Sun Wukong himself was a destroyer. That was his role within the story. And that is the character that Vegeta and Goku are both based on. I want you to keep that in mind. Goku and Vegeta serve the same role as Tripitaka and Sun Wukong from Journey to the West. Vegeta is a representation of the necessity of destruction, and Goku is a representation of the necessity of mercy. They are a parallel to each other and a representation of the necessity of yin and yang, creation and destruction, good and evil. That's what they are. And so that in itself should tell you that this development is catered towards Vegeta specifically. It's also important to keep in mind that Sun Wukong himself was also an example of this concept of mortal development through combining who he used to be with who he would be in order to become his true self and become the victorious fighting Buddha, which is what Toriyama played on whenever he had Vegeta instill his pride into Goku, and Goku use his nature as an Earthling to stop Frieza. So this entire concept is not only a direct reference to Journey to the West, it's a play on Goku and Vegeta's role towards each other on Namek when Vegeta help Goku take on the pride of the Saiyan race and then use his nature as an Earthling to become the ideal mortal. It's also a reflection of the ideas of mortal development that are reflected from Journey to the West itself. And so not only is Vegeta going to become a god of destruction, it is his destiny to become a god of destruction. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.